absolutely insane. Now, here's a post. I'm going to read this for you in 1 second here. It's a little bit longer of a post because if you ask yourself, it's like, okay, well, why is it that FEMA, as an example, there's been so many stories coming out of people that have huge warehouses that they've amassed of food to give out to people, and FEMA is seizing that food supply, and they're moving it to warehouses. But actually, a lot of what they're seizing may not even be used in this. So you ask yourself, well, why? Like, what's their goal? Is it to help the people? Well, so here's a long post that's gone very viral on Twitter that helps you understand what's really going on. Okay, so here's this guy named Ryan Tyre who says, if you're wondering why citizens are being turned away that are coming to help North Carolina and Tennessee, you'll want to hear my experience as someone who has been doing this as a private citizen for almost a decade. I was able to get into and out of Asheville. We brought food, water, fuel, and other supplies, as well as help people affected by the floods. But there are reasons why they're not allowing outside help. I cannot confirm the reasons why in North Carolina, but I can tell you the reasons in other storms I've worked. I'll explain below. Let me share with you the first disaster area that I finally realized that this is all about money. In the Florida Keys with Hurricane Irma, after Texas got hit with Harvey, we finished our efforts in Texas and were the first citizen team to make it to Key Largo. The federal agencies had US 1 shut down just south of Key Largo, and they wouldn't let anyone in or out, even though the road was okay to pass. We explained to them that we had boats, jet skis, food, water, chainsaws, and fuel to bring to these people. They didn't care and wouldn't let us in. It was night by that point, and you rarely saw the lights of vehicles in the distance on the individual keys, meaning the emergency response teams from FEMA weren't even working. It was all quiet. We decided we'd go in anyways. We filled up the boats and jet skis with all that we could reasonably carry and went by water around all their blockades and around their law enforcement presence on the water. It was 87 miles by water to get to our first stop, Cudjoe Key and Sugarloaf Key. When we arrived there, we were greeted by a homeowner who was elated to see us and all the supplies we brought. His house was in shambles. We started offloading supplies on the shoreline and helped him get into what was left of his house. During that process, he explained to us that FEMA had set up a command center at a local high school on the island, but they weren't doing anything to help the residents, not even bringing them water. Instead, he explained they were driving around using a loudspeaker, telling people to stay in their homes. They weren't even helping the homeowners with supplies. I was skeptical at first while he was telling me all this, but then he said something that broke my heart. He told us that the people of the Keys were all in despair because they had just seen weeks before the overwhelming support for Texas with Hurricane Harvey by the citizens of this country. He and his neighbors on all of the Keys felt like Americans had forgotten about them completely because at this point, 5 days after landfall, all they had seen was FEMA and they were no help. The residents were cut off from the outside world, no cellular, no internet, no way to contact anyone or hear of any efforts to try to help them. The only communication they had was from a local radio station on Sugarloaf Key that was broadcasting on AM to the surrounding keys. The man, after hearing that there were citizens trying to bring them help, but being refused entry by federal law enforcement, was visibly upset. He and his neighbors really thought the country had abandoned them. He insisted that we get into his waterlogged truck and he would take us to the radio station so we could go on live on air to tell the citizens trapped in the Keys that we, the American people, were there to help and that the government was trying to stop our efforts. That's exactly what we did. After that, we were determined to help as many people as we could, but we were met with red tape throughout the whole process and the time we were in the Keys. We finally were able to talk to some authorities to let us down to the Ferro Blanca Resort and Marathon towards the end of the Boot Key. This was the same hotel where state and local authorities were staging their personnel, and they were happy to see us. I was able to coordinate several trucks full of supplies to be brought down to the EOC and Marathon. I was privy to the EOC meeting, but was informed in that meeting that all the semi-trucks full of food, water, and hygiene supplies were to be turned around and not allowed to be offloaded for distribution by the EOC. The reason they gave us was that these donations were not from companies on their preferred vendors list, and that they would not accept them or give them to the residents of the Keys impacted by the storm. It was at that point that I realized it's all about money. These preferred vendors are getting part of the money being released by the state and the federal government for each disaster. In turn, some of the vendors make it on the list because a friend gets them on the list, and in return for getting ridiculously outlandish amounts of compensation for the services they render, they give kickbacks. So accepting outside donations, even though they are on location and can help people now, they would rather let people suffer so they can get their kickbacks. This meeting solidified my resolve to help these people regardless of what the greedy officials wanted, and we're going to feed the lower keys that were being neglected. So he continues on with this, but here's some pictures that he has of the operations what they were doing. But isn't that insane that they're literally turning away food and water and products for the people that need them because they want to make sure that the preferred vendors, the people who have the big government contracts, right, the big corporations and whatever it is, whatever kind of phony capitalism there is, that they're the ones that get to have, they get the access, right? They're the ones that get to sell and get the big government payout. I mean, it's absolutely insane. Absolutely insane. So let me see. Okay, now we're going to be getting into